And Leroy Fletcher.
North Georgia residents plead with lawmakers to stop legislation that could prevent them from holding an industry accountable for contaminating their land and drinking water.
I took these photos of our children playing in the creek on our property, and what used to be a beautiful family memory brings feelings of anxiety and fear.
Speaking out during a House Judiciary Committee Tuesday against a bill filed by State Representative Casey Carpenter that would shield carpet manufacturers from litigation involving PFAS exposure, a cancer-causing toxin used by the industry for decades. Amber Fletcher and her husband live a few miles away from one of the carpet manufacturing plants.
If this bill does pass, what incentive is that for them in the future to not ever do this again? I mean,
they need to be held accountable.
Right.
The red dots on this map show elevated levels of PFAS in the Dalton area, according to tests conducted by a law firm that has filed multiple lawsuits against carpet manufacturers. The Fletcher's home is one of them, testing thousands of times higher than the drinking water limits set by the Environmental Protection Agency. The agency says the group of chemicals are linked to cancer, low birth weight, and decreased fertility. When you got those test results, what went through your mind?
My kids. I mean, there's number one, they've played in the water. You know, we've lived off the land.
These forever chemicals were created mostly by two manufacturers.
Representative Carpenter says the intent of the legislation is to redirect responsibility to the chemical makers that made the toxin. Manufacturers like Mohawk Industry claim they were unaware the chemicals were harmful. Carpenter's district includes Dalton, Georgia, the carpet capital of the world.
I mean, at some point, let's focus litigation on the bad actors. So I thought it was important to say, let's cut to the chase. Let's sue the chemical companies that created this. I'm not trying to take people's right away from being made whole, but I am trying to make it so that it's the most efficient, most economical way for people to get resolution without breaking the bank and there not being any money for cleanup.
This bill creates immunity for...
Some members of the committee seem skeptical of the legislation, including Representative Stacey Evans, challenging Carpenter on whether he knows for sure carpet makers were not aware PFAS was dangerous.
What have you done, Representative, to satisfy yourself that the carpet industry did not have any knowledge, did not have any warning itself, regardless of the manufacturers, regardless of regulation, that dumping into the ground could be hazardous to the great residents of Northwest Georgia? That's my question.
Thousands of conversations since Aaron Brockovich showed up in my county. Hey,
You personally reviewed any documents, spent time?
I have not personally reviewed any documents. And if you find that there's willful misconduct, sue them all.
So, Andy, this bill is dead for now?
For now, it did not pass the House Judiciary Committee, and we have seen zero movement so far. But I believe Representative Carpenter, he's still trying.
Well, a lot of the other lawmakers have constituents downstream, quite literally, so that the only constituency that's really asking for this is the heavy industry that is blamed for at least some of the PFAS in the water, correct?
Yeah, the majority of the people that testified involved the carpet manufacturing industry and the people opposing this legislation, which mostly included residents who believe they've been impacted, their water or their land contaminated. And then we also heard from attorneys representing municipalities that have had to sue the carpet manufacturers and the chemical makers for compensation to essentially completely rework their water systems, to install new water systems, very expensive water systems that would hope to remove PFAS from their drinking water.
You've done an excellent job, Andy, of explaining that the carpet industry, their argument is that, hey, we were assured by the chemical manufacturers that these products were safe. We didn't do this recklessly. We just bought a product and used it, believing in what the vendor told us, and why should we be held responsible? Is that effectively what they're saying?
That's essentially exactly what they're saying. But the problem with that is in litigation and during that testimony, there are people saying, we have proof that even after they were told that these toxins were dangerous to the environment and people, they were still using it. And what they're saying is, hey, give us an opportunity to take this to court, to show this information to a jury and let them decide. don't preemptively make them immune to litigation when we believe we have evidence that shows otherwise. It seems like such a glacial issue because we've all been exposed to PFAS, and we all likely have a small trace of PFAS in our bloodstream, some more than others, depending on where you live, depending on what you've been exposed to. And there are mechanisms and things that you can do to reduce it. But as far as the cleanup, that also feels glacial and trying to fix. And there are ways that you can do that to the waterways. I don't know exactly what that looks like when you're trying to address that on land and wells, but there is litigation, pending litigation, that would address some of those things.
I know that you never stop investigating these stories until you get to the rock bottom answer. You've been on this one for a while. Is your next step looking at cancer clusters, or what are you going to look at next?
So Emory University just wrapped up an exposure study where they took blood, they drew blood from about 200 residents that live in Rome and Calhoun, where previous studies have shown an elevated levels of PFAS in their drinking water. And we hope to hear from Emory in about October of what those numbers look like. They're going to publish something for the public. It still will need to be reviewed by peers to look at the results. But in the next month or two, the participants should have their results. But October-ish is when we start. We'll get those, bigger picture results, and based on those results, we'll determine whether Emory or other entities, another university, or maybe the federal or state government will then look at this, maybe possible cancer clusters. This is not going to look at that. This exposure study simply is going to look at who's been exposed and how much has been, how much they were exposed to. It doesn't even look at the source, but depending on the results, we may be seeing more results, more studies based on that.
And this study wouldn't have happened without the work you did with a smaller sample test that showed, in some cases, twice the average PFAS in someone's blood. I mean, you started this.
Yeah, so last year we did something no one else tried to do. We simply wanted to answer a simple question. Were people impacted? How are they impacted? And we tested 11 people. All but 2 had elevated levels above the national median. The person that had the lowest, almost, minute amount of PFAS in their blood was a woman that we had previously interviewed, where she has, over the past decade, almost exclusively got her drinking water from a natural spring.
Fascinating, fascinating. Andy Perotti, investigative reporter with Atlanta News First Investigates. Thank you for your diligent work on this important topic. I'm Chief Investigator Brendan Keefe. You've been listening to or watching Behind the Investigation with Atlanta News First Investigates. You can get this as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or you can see any of Andy's investigations on atlantanewsfirst.com or on the Atlanta News First app. We'll see you next time.